In this lecture, we'll take a look at the scope rules for identifiers. In Java, identifiers are declared in either a method heading, within a block, or outside of a block. These are the only places where we can declare identifiers. Now, remember, what is an identifier? It's the name of something in Java. It could be the name of a variable, it could be a name of a method, but it's something that gives us a name. So the question that we want to ask is, where are we allowed to use a specific identifier? So once I've declared it, am I allowed to use it in just that method? Am I allowed to use it in the entire program? Where can I use it? And that's where we get this notion of a scope. So the scope of an identifier just simply refers to the parts of a program where the identifier can be seen and can be used. There are different types of identifiers, and right now we're going to focus on local identifiers. So a local identifier, it's an identifier, but it's declared within a method or a block. And the rule here is that these identifiers can only be seen within that method or that block that we declared it in. So a block of code, what is that? It's a group of statements that's between a pair of curly braces. So we've seen things like within if statements or loops or methods, but if we declare something within a pair of curly braces, then that variable can only be seen, or that I should say that identifier can only be seen within that pair of curly braces. Now we do need to follow some basic scope rules. So one rule is that nested methods are not allowed. I cannot define a method inside of another method. We can't have methods inside of methods, so methodception is not a thing. So if I want to have more than one method in my program, I can declare and define a method as normal, but the next method has to be defined outside of that method. So we can't, have we seen any methods defined in main? No, it's because we're not allowed to do this. That's just to give an example. Another rule is an identifier must be declared before it can be used. Because when we declare a variable or any type of identifier, that means that we're allocating some space to store something in there. And Java needs to know what the data type of that is. Is it an integer? Is it a double? Is it a character? So before I can use it in my program, I have to at least let the computer know what that data type is. So if I try to use any type of identifier without declaring it, Java's going to go, I don't know what the type is, so I'm just going to give a compiler error. Another rule is that identifiers may be declared outside of any method. However, it has to be declared inside the class. We've seen some examples of this already. So like anytime we declare something outside of main, we can do so, but we have to include the keyword static in front of it. So the point here is that we are allowed to declare identifiers outside of any methods, but we have to make sure that those identifiers are declared inside the class. And another rule is that once an identifier is declared, we cannot use that same identifier within a particular method or block. All this means is if I declare some identifier called x inside a method or a block, I can't declare a second x inside that same method or block. So here is that exact example I was just talking about. So here I have declared x to be an integer variable, and because I've declared this x, I'm not allowed to declare any other variable called x within this method, regardless of type. So we see here within this other block, we're trying to declare x as a double. This is illegal. I'm not allowed to do this. This would give me a compile error because x has already been declared inside this method. We do have some additional scope rules that we need to go over. So let's say I have some identifier x and we declare it within a method or a block. This identifier is accessible only within that same block from which we declared the variable or identifier until the end of that block. So prior to it, it's not visible because we've already run the lines of code, but it's only visible from the point we declared that identifier all the way to the end of that block. And it's accessible within blocks that are nested within the current block. So if I have a block inside of the block where I've created this identifier, it's visible within that block as well. Now let's say we have some identifier x and we declare it within a class, but it's not declared in any method at all. So we have two different cases here. If we declare x, in this case, without the keyword static, then we're not allowed to use it within any static method. So if we're going to use it in a static method, it has to have the keyword static. Now, if it is declared with the reserved word static, then we can access it within a method or a block. However, that method or block cannot have any other identifier named x. If there is some other x in there, then I'm not allowed to do it. So we just have to be careful with that. So if it doesn't have the word static, then I cannot use it in a static method. If it does have the word static, then I can use that variable or identifier within another method or a block, but we can't have any other identifiers within that method or block that has the same name. Now, let's say we declare a variable in the initialization statement of a for loop. That variable is visible only within the body of the for loop. So let me give you an example. Let's say I have the for loop for int I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus. This I in here is only visible inside the for loop. I'm not allowed to use it outside of the for loop. If I have some other statement afterwards that says like I equals 5, Java is going to come back and say I don't know what I is, unless I've declared I ahead of time as being something else. But right now in its current form, I'm not allowed to use I outside of this for loop.